Leipzig, 1942. In the hushed main reading room of the WWII, where leather-bound volumes lined walls that stretched toward vaulted ceilings, and the smell of old paper mixed with floor wax, a gray-haired librarian named Heinrich Müller stood at the card catalog. His hands, weathered from 30 years of handling books, trembled slightly as he opened drawer J.K. To the SS officer, waiting impatiently at the reference desk, he appeared to be simply searching for a requested genealogical record. But Heinrich's heart hammered against his ribs as his fingers found what he was looking for. A single white index card, 3 inches by 5 inches, containing Jakob Kaufmann's birth information, parents' names, and last known address in Hamburg. The card was marked with a red corner stamp, Priority Request, Racial Verification. Heinrich pulled the card halfway out, then let it slip from his fingers. It fluttered to the floor behind the cabinet. "So clumsy," he muttered, loud enough to be heard. He bent down as if to retrieve it, but when he stood up again, his hands were empty and the card was in his jacket pocket. At the reference desk, he smiled apologetically at the SS officer and said the words that could either save a life or end his own. "I'm terribly sorry, sir, but that record appears to be transferred to the Hamburg Municipal Archives in 1937. I can submit a formal request, but it will take 6 to 8 weeks. The officer, annoyed but not suspicious, waved him off. That night, Jakob Kaufmann's card would become ash in Heinrich's kitchen stove. By morning, as far as the Nazi bureaucracy was concerned, Jakob Kaufmann never existed. Heinrich Müller and Anna Bergmann were not resistance fighters in any traditional sense. They carried no weapons, planted no bombs, distributed no pamphlets. To the SS officers who visited the WWII weekly to requisition genealogical records, census data, and residential registries, they were exactly what they appeared to be. A tired librarian nearing retirement, stooped from decades of bending over books, and a severe-looking archivist with a photographic memory who could locate any document in the building's labyrinthine basement. They were invisible, unremarkable, trustworthy. And that invisibility became their weapon. The library was not supposed to be a battlefield, but by 1938 it had become one. The Nazis had discovered that libraries and archives were treasure troves of information for hunting people. Birth records revealed parentage for racial verification. Census documents showed who lived where. Library registration cards listed addresses. Membership lists for reading clubs, professional organizations, and cultural societies identified suspected communists, intellectuals, and subversives. The regime's obsession with documentation, with cataloging and cross-referencing every aspect of German life, had transformed harmless bureaucratic records into instruments of genocide. And Heinrich and Anna had the keys to that arsenal. They had both witnessed Kristallnacht in November 1938. Heinrich stood outside the Leipzig synagogue and watched it burn while police stood by and did nothing. Anna saw Gestapo officers arrive at the library the next morning with a list of 37 names, demanding every record they had on each person. By the end of the week, all 37 had been arrested. That was when Heinrich and Anna understood that their life's work, the preservation and organization of knowledge, had been perverted into something monstrous. So they made a pact in the basement archives, surrounded by thousands of boxes of documents, speaking in whispers that could not be overheard. They would use their access, their expertise, and their absolute invisibility to wage a quiet war. They would become saboteurs of paper and ink, fighting the Nazi killing machine one record at a time. Heinrich Müller stood on Gottschedstrasse on the night of November 9, 1938, and watched the Leipzig synagogue burn. Orange flames climbed through the broken windows while smoke poured into the autumn sky. A crowd had gathered, some jeering, most simply watching in silence. Police officers stood at the perimeter, arms crossed, doing nothing. Heinrich's hands trembled at his sides. He thought of Sarah, his wife, buried 2 years now in the Jewish cemetery. He thought of how she would have wept to see this. Then he walked home through streets littered with broken glass that crunched beneath his shoes like ice. Across the city, Anna Bergman sat in her small apartment reading the morning newspaper with growing horror. Synagogues destroyed, Jewish businesses shattered, arrests by the hundreds. Her brother Friedrich had warned her before they took him to Dachau in 1934. This is only the beginning. She had not wanted to believe him. Now she folded the newspaper with careful precision, her hands steady despite the rage burning in her chest. The next morning, 3 Gestapo officers arrived at the WWII before the library officially opened. The lead officer, a man named Klaus Weber, carried a typewritten list of 37 names. "We need complete records," he told Heinrich, who had been unlocking the main doors. "Birth certificates, addresses, family information, library cards, everything you have." Heinrich took the list. His reading glasses slipped down his nose as he scanned the names. He recognized 4 of them, regular patrons who borrowed philosophy texts and poetry collections. His throat tightened. "This will take several hours," he managed to say. "We'll wait," Weber replied, lighting a cigarette. For 6 hours, Heinrich moved through the library's archives like a man in a nightmare. Each document he pulled felt like a betrayal. Birth certificates revealed parentage, address cards showed current residences, family trees mapped entire networks of relatives. He was not gathering information, he was loading ammunition. By noon, he had assembled 37 complete dossiers, each one bound with string and stamped with the library's official seal. Weber collected them without comment and left. By the end of the week, all 37 people had been arrested. 2 days later, Anna found Heinrich sitting on the floor of the basement archives between 2 filing cabinets. His face was gray. She lowered herself to sit beside him, her back against the cold metal. They did not speak for a long time. Finally, Anna broke the silence. "My brother died in Dachau 3 years ago. Communist activities," they said. "I have kept my head down. I have followed every rule. I thought that was enough." Heinrich removed his glasses and cleaned them on his cardigan, though they were not dirty. "My wife Sarah was Jewish. She died in 1936 before." He stopped, unable to finish. "I thought I had lost everything already. I was wrong." "We have to do something," Anna said. Heinrich turned to look at her. Behind his wire-rimmed spectacles, his eyes were red. "If we are caught, they will kill us." Anna nodded slowly. She thought of Friedrich, of the 37 names on Weber's list, of the synagogue burning. Then we had better not get caught. They shook hands in the dim light of the archives. It was not a dramatic gesture. It was a pact between 2 civil servants who understood that sometimes preserving life meant being willing to destroy the records that made those lives visible to those who hunted them. Heinrich's first act of sabotage was an accident that became intentional. In March 1939, an SS officer requested residential records for a family named Hoffman. Heinrich carried the file to the reference desk along with his morning coffee. His hand shook. It always shook now when handling these requests, and the coffee spilled across the open folder, bleeding brown stains through 3 pages of addresses. "Clumsy of me," he muttered, genuinely embarrassed by his trembling. But as he blotted the papers, he realized the addresses were now illegible. He filed a report about the damaged documents and quietly destroyed them that evening. The Hoffmans were never found. Anna's approach was more surgical. She understood that the library's vast archive system had cracks, departments that rarely communicated, filing protocols that allowed for interpretation, basement storage areas that had not been inventoried in years. When a genealogical request came for the Steinberg family tree, she retrieved it, then refiled it in agricultural records under Crop Rotation Studies 1912. It would take months, perhaps years, for anyone to discover it there. By then, the search would have moved on. They met weekly in the basement archives to refine their methods. Anna brought a notebook, writing in careful code. They developed what they called the three-part system: physical removal, stealing cards and documents to be burned at home, creative misfiling, sending records to bureaucratic dead ends where they would languish forgotten, strategic bombing damage, exploiting the chaos of Allied air raids to explain missing files, though the raids had not yet begun in earnest. The psychological cost was immediate. Heinrich smiled at SS officers who complimented the library's efficiency. Anna attended mandatory party rallies for civil servants, raising her arm in salute, while her stomach churned. Every evening, Heinrich walked home carrying stolen documents in his jacket lining. Every night, Anna burned papers in her kitchen stove, watching names curl into ash. Their first confirmed success came in July 1939. A man named David Rosen had been flagged for arrest. Political agitator, the file said. Heinrich removed his library registration card and census record. Anna misfiled his birth certificate. 3 months later, they learned through whispered conversations in the resistance network that Rosen had escaped to Switzerland. The Gestapo had found no trace of him in Leipzig's records. They allowed themselves one moment of celebration, a shared cup of tea in the archives. No words necessary. By 1940, they had saved 14 people, but they needed help. The requests were increasing, and 2 people could not maintain the workload without arousing suspicion through delays. Frida Hartmann worked at the circulation desk. She was 53, efficient, and had recently begun wearing black. Her son had been killed on the Eastern Front in the winter of 1940. Heinrich noticed how her hands lingered on books about war, how her face hardened when SS officers joked in the reading room. One evening, as they closed the library, Heinrich took a calculated risk. "I'm sorry about your son," he said quietly. Frida's jaw tightened. He died for nothing, from madness. Heinrich glanced around the empty lobby. "Some of us are trying to save what we can. If you wanted to help, there might be a way." Frida studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once, sharp and certain. "Tell me what you need." They were no longer alone. The quiet resistance was growing, one careful recruit at a time. Heinrich Müller became 2 people. The first Heinrich was the helpful librarian who explained the Dewey Decimal System to SS officers with patient courtesy, who organized files with meticulous precision, who never missed a day of work in 30 years. The second Heinrich stood at that same reference desk with 3 stolen identity cards pressed against his ribs beneath his cardigan, feeling his heart hammer so hard he was certain everyone could hear it. The split happened dozens of times each day. An officer would ask for genealogical records. Heinrich would nod, smile, say, "Of course, let me check our catalog," while his mind screamed warnings. He would disappear into the stacks, locate the requested file, and in that brief moment of privacy, he made his choice. Sometimes he returned with the documents. Sometimes he returned with an apology about missing records. The performance had to be flawless every single time. Anna's mask was even more rigid. Once a month, the library staff assembled in the plaza for mandatory party rallies. She stood in formation with the other civil servants, raised her arm to salute, and mouthed the words to speeches praising the Reich. Her face revealed nothing. But that evening she would stand at her kitchen stove burning the residential records she had stolen that morning, watching the names of Jewish families dissolve into smoke, and she would permit herself to weep. The isolation was its own kind of torture. They could not confide in family members or old friends. The fewer people who knew, the safer everyone remained. Heinrich's sister wrote letters asking why he seemed so distant. He wrote back with cheerful lies about being busy at work. Anna stopped attending social gatherings entirely, claiming exhaustion. People began to think her cold, antisocial. She accepted the judgment without defense. The nightmares came in the second year. Heinrich dreamed of filing cabinets that opened to reveal bodies instead of papers. Anna woke gasping from visions of Gestapo officers finding her hidden ledger, of torture chambers, of the guillotine. They both developed the same paranoid habit of checking over their shoulders constantly, of flinching at unexpected footsteps. But they found small rebellions that kept them human. After the library closed, Anna would lock herself in the rare books room and read volumes by Heinrich Heine, Lion Feuchtwanger, and other Jewish authors whose works were now forbidden. She read aloud sometimes, quietly, as though the words themselves were acts of resurrection. Every Sunday, Heinrich visited the Jewish cemetery where Sarah was buried. He brought flowers, whatever was in season, and sat beside her grave for an hour. He told her about the people he had saved that week, speaking their names like prayers. The cemetery was neglected now, overgrown and forgotten, but Heinrich kept Sarah's plot tended. It was the one place he did not have to pretend. On particularly difficult days, when the weight of their double lives threatened to crush them, Heinrich and Anna would meet in the basement archives. They would sit in silence among the filing cabinets, not speaking, simply existing in the presence of someone who understood. They never touched, never embraced, but that shared silence, heavy with all the things they could not say to anyone else, sustained them. They were exhausted, they were terrified, they were utterly alone. But they continued day after day, maintaining the performance that kept them alive and the sabotage that gave that life meaning.
Hauptsturmführer Ernst Dietrich arrived at the WWII in a gray morning in January 1942. Unlike the other SS officers who barked orders and made crude jokes in the reading room, Dietrich was quiet, precise, and observant. He introduced himself to Heinrich with a firm handshake and explained that he had recently been appointed head of the Leipzig Genealogical Research Department. "I have a doctorate in archival science from Heidelberg. I appreciate good systems." Heinrich felt ice form in his stomach. A man who understood systems would notice when those systems failed. Dietrich's first visit seemed routine. He requested several genealogical files, thanked Heinrich courteously, and spent 3 hours in the reading room taking meticulous notes. But Heinrich noticed how Dietrich's gaze swept across the card catalogs, how he observed the flow of staff members retrieving documents, how he asked seemingly innocent questions about filing protocols and cross-referencing procedures. 2 weeks later, Dietrich returned with a specific request. "I need the complete Rosenberg family tree," he said. "It's for racial verification purposes. The files should be quite comprehensive. The family has been in Leipzig for 4 generations." Anna retrieved the file from the archives. Her face remained neutral when she handed it to Dietrich, but Heinrich saw her fingers tighten briefly on the folder. He knew what that meant. The Rosenberg file had been one of their early targets. Anna had removed 2 generations of birth records and misfiled supporting documents. Dietrich opened the folder at the reference desk. For several long minutes he examined the incomplete family tree, turning pages slowly. Then he looked up at Anna. "This seems rather sparse," he said softly. "Are you certain this is everything we have?" "That's the complete file, Hauptsturmführer," Anna replied without hesitation. "Some older records were damaged in a basement flood several years ago." Dietrich's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. He did not accuse. He simply nodded, closed the folder, and left. After that, he began appearing unannounced. Heinrich would arrive in the morning to find Dietrich already in the archives, examining filing cabinets. Anna would turn a corner in the stacks and encounter him studying shelf labels. He conducted random spot checks, requesting files and then cross-referencing them against records from other municipal offices. "He's hunting," Anna told Heinrich during one of their careful conversations in the basement. "We need to stop," Heinrich said, though the words felt like betrayal. "We need to be more careful." "But people are still being arrested every day," Anna countered. "If we stop, they die." It was an impossible equation. Every act of sabotage increased their risk of exposure, but every day of inaction meant someone else might be found and deported. The requests kept coming: genealogical records, residential registries, employment histories. Each one was a potential death sentence. They continued their work, but more carefully now. Heinrich developed an elaborate system of checking which officers were in the building before retrieving sensitive files. Anna began creating more sophisticated cover stories for missing documents, with complete forged maintenance reports and damage assessments. But Dietrich kept circling, patient and methodical. He was not like the other hunters. He did not rely on violence or intimidation. He relied on patterns, inconsistencies, and the meticulous observation of a man who understood that good systems should never fail this frequently. Heinrich and Anna had faced brutal officers before. Now they faced something more dangerous, an intelligent enemy who would not stop until he found the crack in their armor.
The air sirens began wailing at 10:47 p.m. on February 16, 1943. Heinrich was working late, cataloging new acquisitions, when the building's emergency alarm joined the cacophony outside. Staff members rushed toward the basement shelters, grabbing coats and bags. "Herr Müller, you must come now," a junior librarian shouted. Heinrich nodded but did not follow. He waited until the footsteps faded, then moved quickly to the genealogical archives on the 4th floor. His hands were steady as he pulled files marked with red corner stamps, priority requests from the Racial Verification Office. Outside, the air filled with the distant thunder of bombs and the closer sound of anti-aircraft guns. Anna found him there 5 minutes later. She carried an armful of residential registries. They did not speak. They had discussed this possibility weeks earlier, weighing the terrible mathematics. During raids, when chaos reigned and staff huddled in shelters, they could destroy records without suspicion. The bombing would provide cover for what they chose to eliminate. The building shuddered as explosions walked across the city. Windows rattled in their frames. Anna and Heinrich worked methodically, sorting through files, selecting those that would condemn people to arrest and deportation. They carried armfuls to the basement boiler room and fed them into the furnace. Paper curled and blackened. Names turned to ash. By the time the all clear sounded at midnight, 34 files had ceased to exist. The next morning, Heinrich filed a report documenting regrettable losses due to structural damage and broken windows during the raid. The library director, exhausted and grateful no one had been injured, barely glanced at the paperwork. Over the following months, the Allied bombing campaign intensified. Leipzig was hit repeatedly, the railway yards, the industrial districts, the residential neighborhoods. Each raid brought destruction and death. Heinrich would stand at his apartment window afterwards, watching smoke rise from burning buildings, knowing that people had died in those fires. Then he would go to work and use those same fires as tactical cover. The moral weight was crushing. On March 12, 1943, a particularly heavy raid struck the eastern districts. The library shook so violently that books fell from shelves and plaster cracked in the ceilings. Heinrich and Anna stayed at their posts while others fled to safety. They destroyed 23 files that night, their most productive evening yet. But Heinrich could not forget that the bombs creating their opportunity were also killing civilians. Families were being incinerated in their homes. He was exploiting their deaths to save other lives. The mathematics was necessary, but unforgivable. "We are using horror as a tool," Heinrich told Anna one evening as they walked home through streets still smelling of smoke. Anna was quiet for a long moment. "Yes," she finally said, "but we did not create the horror. We are simply trying to save who we can from it." It was not absolution. It was acknowledgement of the impossible position they occupied.
They were committing necessary evils in service of something they believed was good. They were allowing historically valuable documents, irreplaceable medieval manuscripts, rare first editions, to be damaged or destroyed because Nazi records were stored nearby and the chaos provided cover. Every raid brought death. Every raid brought opportunity. Heinrich and Anna stood in that terrible intersection, choosing again and again to act, knowing the moral stain would never wash clean, but believing that saving lives justified the cost. The sky burned, the files burned, and somewhere in Leipzig, people whose names had vanished from the Reich's records continued to breathe.
Heinrich found it by accident in July 1943. He had come to Anna's office looking for a census volume and noticed a copy of Mein Kampf on her shelf, the only book in the room that looked pristine, untouched. Curious, he pulled it down. The moment he felt the weight, he knew something was wrong. The book was too light. Inside, the pages had been carefully carved out, creating a small hollow cavity. Nestled within was a small notebook filled with Anna's meticulous handwriting. Names, dates, brief notations. Jakob Kaufmann, Hamburg, February 1942, survived. Rosenberg family, Leipzig, April 1941, emigrated. Page after page of them. By Heinrich's count, 47 pages, 96 names. His hands shook as he turned the pages. Then he saw the second section, written in different ink. Martin Levy, too late, arrested November 1940. Sarah Klein, file discovered before removal, deported March 1941. The ones they had failed to save. Anna entered her office and froze. Heinrich stood with the ledger open in his hands, his face drained of color. "Have you lost your mind?" His voice was barely a whisper, but the fury beneath it was unmistakable. "If Dietrich finds this, everyone on these pages dies. Everyone we've saved, everyone we're trying to save, all of it exposed because you decided to keep a record?" Anna closed the door carefully before responding. "I know the risk." "Then destroy it, now." "No." The word hung between them like a physical barrier. Heinrich stared at her, uncomprehending. "Anna, this is madness. We've been so careful." "We are not the regime," Anna interrupted, her voice steel. "They reduce people to numbers, to categories, to problems to be eliminated. I will not do the same." She took the ledger from his hands. "These are human beings. Jakob Kaufmann was a teacher who loved Goethe. The Rosenbergs had 3 generations in Leipzig. If we are going to risk everything, we need to remember why. We need to remember them as people, not just files we destroyed." "And the ones you failed to save? Why torture yourself with that?" Anna's jaw tightened. "Because they deserve to be remembered too. Because someone should know their names, should acknowledge that they mattered, that we tried. If I forget them, if I pretend they never existed, then I become part of the machinery that erased them." Heinrich sat heavily in Anna's desk chair. "If they catch us, this ledger ensures that every person we saved will be retargeted. You're not just risking our lives, you're risking theirs." "I know," Anna said quietly. She opened the ledger to a recent entry. "But without this, I am nothing more than a saboteur. With it, I am someone who remembers, someone who bears witness. That difference matters to me." They argued for an hour, voices low and tense. Heinrich's position was purely tactical. The ledger was an unacceptable security risk. Anna's was moral. Without remembering the individuals, they were no better than the bureaucrats processing deportation orders. Finally, they reached a compromise. Anna would move the ledger from her office to a more secure location, the rare books room, hidden inside an obscure medieval manuscript that hadn't been requested in decades. She would continue recording names, but she would add no identifying details that could lead the Gestapo back to specific individuals if the ledger were discovered. As Heinrich left her office, Anna added his objection to a note at the back of the ledger.
HM argues this is too dangerous. He is probably right, but I cannot stop. These names are the reason we continue. That night, Anna sat at her kitchen table and memorized all 96 names on the saved list. She recited them like a prayer, like an incantation against forgetting. They were her burden and her purpose, the weight that kept her human in an inhuman time.
By autumn 1943, the requests came faster than Heinrich and Anna could manage. 3 genealogical investigations in a single morning, 5 residential verifications by afternoon, urgent stamps on folders, red corner marks indicating priority arrests. They could not save everyone. The arithmetic was brutal and inescapable. They developed criteria, though the word felt obscene. Families with young dependents received priority. Known resistance members whose arrests might compromise networks, people on immediate deportation lists rather than those under routine surveillance. Each decision was a calculus of suffering, and every choice meant someone else would not be saved. The worst day came on October 14th. 2 files arrived simultaneously. The first, the Adler family, parents, grandmother, 3 young ones ranging from infant to 8 years old, flagged for deportation within the week. The second, Ernst Vogel, a communist organizer, 47 years old, no dependents. The file indicated he possessed critical intelligence about underground networks in Leipzig and Dresden. Heinrich and Anna stood in the archives, staring at both folders. They had time to properly sabotage only one before the officers returned. Saving Vogel might protect dozens of resistance members, but the Adler family would certainly perish in the camps. "The family," Anna said finally, her voice hollow. Heinrich nodded. He could not speak. They destroyed the Adler records and returned Vogel's file intact. 3 days later, whispers reached them through the resistance network. Ernst Vogel had been arrested, tortured, and executed. Under interrogation, he had revealed nothing. 17 people in the underground survived because of his silence. But Heinrich could not stop seeing Vogel's photograph from the file, a middle-aged man with thinning hair and kind eyes, a man they had condemned to death. After that, something broke in Heinrich. He began taking reckless chances. He stole files in daylight with officers nearby. He forged documents without proper preparation. When Anna questioned him, he brushed her off. "We're saving people," he said tersely. "You're trying to die," Anna replied. The confrontation came in November in the basement archives during lunch hour. Heinrich announced he was going to destroy an entire drawer of priority arrest files, 23 records at once, an impossibly dangerous operation. "You'll expose everything," Anna said sharply. "They'll notice that many missing files. Dietrich will launch a full investigation, and everyone we've saved will be retargeted. Better than letting them all be arrested while we play it safe." Anna's control finally shattered. "This isn't about them. This is about Sarah. You think if you die doing this work, it will redeem you for not saving her. But your death will accomplish nothing except getting us both killed and destroying everything we've built." Heinrich turned on her, fury and grief warring in his face. "Don't you dare!" "She died of pneumonia, Heinrich. There was no saving her, and your guilt is blinding you to the people we can actually help. I will not let you turn this into a suicide mission because you cannot forgive yourself." The words hung in the cold air between them. Heinrich's shoulders began to shake. Then he was weeping, great wrenching sobs he could no longer contain. Anna moved to him, and they held each other in the dim basement, surrounded by the files of the living and the dead, both crying for Ernst Vogel, for Sarah, for all the impossible choices. When they finally pulled apart, Anna spoke quietly but firmly. "We save who we can. We make the best choices we're capable of making. We do not waste our lives trying to be martyrs. Agreed?" Heinrich wiped his eyes behind his spectacles. Agreed. They would continue.
They would carry the weight of their failures, but they would not surrender to guilt or recklessness. The work was too important, and the people who might yet be saved deserved better than that.
The announcement came on a Monday morning in February 1944. Hauptsturmführer Dietrich arrived at the library with 2 assistants and requested an emergency staff meeting. The entire team assembled in the main reading room, librarians, archivists, clerks, while Dietrich stood before them with his characteristic calm precision. We have identified significant irregularities in Leipzig's genealogical records. Cross-references with Berlin headquarters reveal an unusual number of incomplete files, missing documents, and unverifiable claims. Effective immediately, we will conduct a comprehensive audit of all archives. Henrik felt the blood drain from his face. Beside him, Anna's expression remained perfectly neutral, but her hands clasped together tightly in her lap. Dietrich continued. The audit will proceed alphabetically, beginning this coming Monday with Section A. We will systematically review every file and verify it against duplicate records held in Berlin and other municipal offices. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembled staff. Any discrepancies will be thoroughly investigated. After the meeting, Henrik and Anna did not dare speak until they were alone in the basement. Henrik calculated quickly, his mind racing through the filing system. "Section M," he whispered. "They'll reach it by Friday." The M section contained some of their most extensive alterations. The Müller family records, the Meyer files, dozens of others they had sabotaged over the years. When Berlin's duplicates arrived for comparison, the discrepancies would be undeniable. Dietrich would have his proof of internal sabotage. "We have 72 hours, Anna said. "We can run." Henrik looked at her. In 6 years of working together, they had never once considered fleeing. Running meant abandoning everyone they had saved, whose altered records might be reconstructed. Running meant the work stopped immediately. "Or we fight," Henrik said. They chose to fight. Over 3 sleepless nights, they executed their most audacious operation. They worked in shifts, one keeping watch, one in the archives. They identified 67 additional high-risk files and destroyed them completely. But destruction alone would not save them. They needed a plausible explanation for the missing records that would appear to be catastrophe rather than sabotage. Anna designed the cover story, a water leak in the basement archive storage. Henrik bribed a maintenance worker named Klaus, a man whose sister had been saved by their work, to help stage the scene. On Thursday night, they used buckets to pour water across section K through N of the filing system. They damaged cabinets, created water stains on walls, and carefully distributed moisture to make it appear as though a pipe had burst days earlier. Thursday morning, Klaus discovered the leak and reported it to the library director. Henrik arrived to assess the damage, his performance flawless. Shock, dismay, professional concern. "The files in sections K through N have suffered water damage," he reported grimly. "Many are illegible or destroyed. This is catastrophic." Anna forged maintenance reports backdated to the previous week, documenting a slow leak that had gone unnoticed until catastrophic failure. She created work orders, damage assessments, inventories of lost materials. The documentation was meticulous, exactly what bureaucratic minds would expect. Dietrich arrived that afternoon to inspect the damage personally. He walked through the affected sections, examining wet cabinets and damaged folders. Henrik and Anna stood nearby, answering his questions with appropriate distress and professional contrition. "How long has this leak existed?" Dietrich asked. "The maintenance reports indicate at least a week," Anna replied, handing him the forged documents. "The damage appears to have accelerated over the past 48 hours. Dietrich studied the reports, then the water-stained walls. His expression was unreadable. For several agonizing minutes, he examined the scene in silence. Finally, he spoke. Unfortunate timing. His eyes met Henrik's, and in that moment, Henrik knew Dietrich knew. But without proof, without being able to demonstrate the leak was staged, Dietrich had nothing. "The audit will proceed as scheduled," Dietrich said. "We will work with what remains." They had bought time, perhaps survival, but the trap had not closed. It had merely tightened.
Anna could not sleep on the night March 6, 1944. The audit had passed, the water leak accepted as tragic accident, but she knew the scrutiny would continue. At 4:30 a.m., she dressed and walked through the dark streets to the library. There were documents still too dangerous to keep, files she had hidden during the staged flood, records she could not risk being discovered. She entered through the side door with her key, moved through the silent building to the basement, and began feeding papers into the boiler room furnace. The flames consumed names, addresses, family trees. She worked methodically, as she always had. At 4:47 a.m., she heard footsteps on the stairs. Hauptstufe Dietrich appeared in the doorway. He had arrived early, unable to sleep, his suspicions giving him no rest. He looked at Anna, then at the furnace, then at the half-burned papers in her hands. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Anna set the remaining papers on the floor. "I'm finished," she said quietly. Dietrich nodded. "I know." Heinrich was arrested at his apartment at 7:15 a.m. He did not resist. He asked only if he could put on his good jacket, and the officers allowed it. As they led him to the car, he looked back once at the building where he had lived for 23 years, then climbed in without protest. The interrogations lasted 3 weeks. They wanted names. Who else was involved? Whose records had been destroyed so those people could be retargeted? What resistance networks they belonged to? The Gestapo's methods were designed to break anyone, to turn loyalty into betrayal through pain and exhaustion. Heinrich told them nothing. During one session, when the interrogator demanded to know how many files they had destroyed, Heinrich replied simply, "I lost count. You will have to assume everyone might have been saved." Anna's interrogators were particularly focused on her ledger. They had searched her apartment, her office, everywhere, but found nothing. "Where is your list?" they demanded. "Where did you record the names?" Anna, her face bruised but her voice steady, replied, "I kept no records. I remember nothing. You will have to search the ashes." She had memorized 142 names, but she would die with them locked in her mind. The Gestapo would never know who had been saved. On May 12, 1944, they were executed by guillotine at Leipzig prison. The prison chaplain recorded the final moments. Anna was brought to the execution chamber first. She walked without assistance, her head high. She did not pray, did not speak. When they positioned her, she did not flinch. Heinrich followed 15 minutes later. The chaplain asked if he had any final words. Heinrich adjusted his wire-rimmed spectacles one last time and said clearly, "I was a librarian. My job was to preserve truth. I did my job." The blade fell at 9:47 a.m. The Nazi records documented that 142 files had been irreparably compromised through internal sabotage. In the chaos of 1945, as the Reich collapsed and Allied forces liberated Leipzig, 89 people whose records had been altered by Heinrich Müller and Anna Bergmann survived. Most never knew why the Gestapo had never found them. In 2003, a historian researching the WWII found Anna's ledger hidden inside a medieval manuscript in the rare books collection. The volume had survived the war, shelved and forgotten. Inside were 142 names written in meticulous handwriting. At the bottom of the last page, Anna had written a final entry dated March 5, 1944. "We were the gatekeepers. We chose mercy. That will have to be enough." It was enough. The names are remembered. the lives were saved, and 2 civil servants who became quiet warriors proved that even in the machinery of genocide, individuals could choose resistance, could choose humanity, could choose to make the records lie in service of truth. Their memorial stands in Leipzig today, visited by descendants of those 89 survivors, a testament to the extraordinary courage of ordinary people who decided that 1 person, or 2, could make a difference.
This story is a fictionalized narrative inspired by documented acts of resistance by civil servants and archivists during the Nazi era, though Heinrich Müller and Anna Bergmann are fictional characters. The WWII in Leipzig and the systematic exploitation of library and archival records for the Nazi persecution are historically accurate. The Reich's genealogical research departments did use library systems, census data, and municipal archives to identify and track Jews, political dissidents, and other targeted groups. While this specific narrative is invented, it honors real acts of bureaucratic resistance during the Holocaust. Documented cases exist of civil servants who used their positions to sabotage Nazi documentation systems, including Oskar Schindler's List, diplomats who issued false papers, and clerks who lost deportation orders. The vulnerability of paper-based systems to internal sabotage through misfiling, deliberate destruction, and exploitation of wartime chaos is drawn from historical accounts of resistance within Nazi administrative structures. The Allied bombing campaign against Leipzig occurred as described, with the city suffering repeated raids between 1943 and 1945. Technical details about archival procedures, card catalog systems, and genealogical research methods reflect actual practices of the period. This story represents the courage of countless individuals who resisted fascism through quiet, methodical acts of defiance within bureaucratic systems. While Heinrich and Anna are fictional, their actions reflect the documented reality that resistance took many forms, and that ordinary people in ordinary positions chose extraordinary courage when confronted with genocide. If this story moved you, please subscribe to our channel. We tell the forgotten stories of ordinary people who made extraordinary choices in history's darkest moments. These are the stories that don't make it into textbooks but deserve to be remembered. Hit the subscribe button and join us in honoring the courage of those who risked everything for what was right.